Since I was 11 years old and saw 2001: A Space Odyssey for the first time, I always kind of wanted a computer that was as smart as hell, even if it won't open the pod bay doors when I need it to. Well, now we're in a moment where humans can think fast, but computers are thinking faster. So what do we think about that? And how can we think we might think about making sure we could still think when the AI is doing the thinking for us? We'll be discussing that with Dr. Tessa Forshaw, recorded live from South by Southwest EDU on the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now. Amazing.
What
you
a
guys
great
are my
group.
favorite live podcast.
Yeah, favorite by far. I mean, we've done live shows, but this far exceeds anything. I mean, usually we get like 5 people cheering for anything that we do, so it's kind of nice to have some more people.
Yeah, far and away our best audience, which is great. It's great to get the feedback. One thing, there's kind of an elephant in the, or a lack of elephant in the room, although he'd be mad if he heard I called him an elephant. Dana is not here with us right now. He couldn't make the trip. But that means that there will be 33% less geeks, but 99% less dad jokes.
Yeah, Dana is the king of dad jokes. Honestly, I don't even know how he does it. Like,
I know.
He doesn't have anything prepped. He just randomly throws in something, which is fantastic. So we're going to miss Dana. He's back in Salt Lake.
Yeah,
but
we do miss him. By the way, that dad joke that I just told, I workshopped with Claude. And, I asked Claude for a
I didn't
dad
even
joke.
pick up on it.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
It was terrible because I didn't pick up on it at all.
Well, then that was my input. That was humans plus AI right there.
No,
well, that's kind of what we're talking about today. Let's bring on our celebrity guest. Dr. Tessa Forshaw is from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where she is a founding scholar of the Next Level Lab and the inaugural incumbent faculty chair of the Workforce and Workplace Learning Concentration and of the Workforce Learning and Innovation Initiative at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She also teaches creative problem solving at the Harvard Innovation Labs, was previously on the faculty at the Stanford D School, and worked for IDEO and Accenture, 2 of those companies I love. Tessa is the co-author, 3 of them I love. What am I saying? Tessa is the co-author of Innovation-ish from Wiley and the recipient of 2 Core 77 Design Awards and a Fast Company Design Award. Let's welcome my favorite Aussie, Dr. Tessa Forshaw. Hi, Tessa.
Hey, I'm really, really grateful that you didn't leave out the most important detail in my bio, which is that I'm Australian.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, if we didn't know that before, we certainly know it now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
Absolutely. How has your South by Southwest EDU been, Tessa?
It's been really fun. A couple of days ago, I had this amazing session where we went into Antone's here, which has an amazing history of blues music and cognitive apprenticeship between all of the blues musicians throughout history, and is a real community of practice and center for how blues has existed today. And we got to see these 3 world-class string musicians go on stage and practice. They weren't just, performing, they were practicing.
Yeah.
And watching them make mistakes and discuss it and unpack it and stop and redo it and try things over, and hearing that dialogue was just such a privilege and really cool.
It was amazing because as a kid who grew up being taught if I made a mistake, I was bad and a failure, that was a real eye-opener, and I absolutely loved that. That was great. Jake, how about you? What's been your highlight?
My highlight, the fried chicken. I'm not gonna lie, I've eaten way too much.
Yeah.
Which one?
Seriously.
Haven't you had a few fried chickens?
I've had more fried chicken probably in the last 10 years, just in 4 days. But no, my highlight was that was a big highlight. We also did a tabletop gaming thing for high schoolers. I thought that was fun. We had to do a role-playing game in that, which was, I had a really hard character to role play, but you had to, again, I think we were talking about this, Bob and I were talking about this earlier, but to get into the role play, you really have to commit to it, and one was a little harder, but I would say, the Anton thing was awesome. That was my
really
favorite.
Good. Yeah, those would be my highlights as well. Anybody in the audience like a D&D player? Oh, wow, excellent, and willing to admit it. Yeah, very good. You know how it goes, if you don't get into character, it's just not fun. Yeah, that's kind of what I learned from that, even though I think that's a great tool for education. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about how do we think when computers are thinking faster, which really is an exploration of metacognition in an AI-fueled world. So Tessa, metacognition, it's kind of a buzzword. What does it mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to sort of break it down. So meta meaning above or self-referential, and cognition meaning how we think, feel, and act. So metacognition, if we sort of mush them together, then is the thinking and exploration of our thinking, feelings, and actions. And it's something all of us can do without any expense or any fancy tools. We just need this like lovely thing in between our heads.
So with metacognition, like, why do we think it's so important today, like in an AI-driven world that we in currently?
Yeah, great question. So I think just like level set about why metacognition is important sort of in the world. So there's been a lot of reliable research over the last 20, 30 years that has really shown us that in educational settings, metacognition accounts for about 70% of the variance between why students do and don't perform well in tests. Some really great studies that focus on the GCSEs in the UK that have especially shown that. We also see that in creative problem solving, metacognition throughout the creative problem solving process often results in 2 times as many ideas. Those ideas tend to be about 3 times more novel. And when final projects are evaluated by independent experts, they're considered to be, more appropriate, innovative ideas for the market to go to market.
So why is it especially important now in this day of AI? I'm thinking of these studies that we're starting to see that say...
Sort of like very polarizing too.
Yeah. That using AI extensively is kind of rotting our brain. That's the Bob Gerard interpretation of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely research right now that's showing us that. There's this interesting Wharton preprint that introduced this idea of cognitive surrender. And that's showing that we tend to bypass our own reasoning when AI is available. There's also a really interesting study from Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon that shows that the more you trust AI, the less critically you think. A Lancet study that demonstrated measurable de-skilling in doctors only 3 months after AI use. And Anthropic's own research actually has been showing that junior developers using AI tend to score 17% or more lower on comprehension of their coding tasks. So, there is quite a bit of data out there that's saying AI is changing and shaping how we think. But I think the really important thing to remember about this is that this isn't really unexpected. We have a lot of cognitive biases and evolutionary tendencies that sort of align to these findings and make them not that surprising. So, for example, your brain accounts for 2% of your body weight, but it uses 20% of your metabolic energy, which is quite a bit more, right? Out of proportion. And so we have this sort of default tendency as humans to preserve our metabolic energy. That's important. We need metabolic energy. If you think about evolutionary history, metabolic energy equaled more likely to be alive tomorrow, right? And so as a result of that, we tend to try to offload things that seem costly to metabolic energy. So the fact that we're finding a tool and we're offloading something to preserve our metabolic energy feels very unsurprising.
Yeah, so we shouldn't necessarily feel guilty about it. It's kind of like evolution programmed us for that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean we want it to happen.
No, completely.
I mean, I was always told that our brains are lazy, or we always try to look for the easiest path. Like, what is the reason behind it then? Like, from a cognitive science standpoint? Yeah,
so that's sort of the reason. I mean, that's the reason that we use... So finding the easiest path is why we have cognitive biases and heuristics, which are sort of shortcuts to our thinking, because the more we're able to rely on a bias or a heuristic to inform our thinking, the less processing we need to do, or effortful processing we need to do, and therefore the less metabolic energy we use.
Yeah, so let's maybe jump into some other topics here. So about metacognition, about some of these polarizing topics. What are some of the things that we can start to take from it, to learn from it, and to do? Because again, I think what I find interesting about metacognition is anybody, doesn't matter what field, profession you're in, you can start to utilize it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think it's really important to remember, though, that like AI isn't the first time that we've actually seen us use tools and offload different parts of our processing. So and we can learn a lot from those experiences. So, for example, there are a lot of studies that show the introduction of internet search. We outsourced memory. The introduction of GPS, we outsourced spatial awareness and spatial cognition. And so all of those examples throughout history, I think, suggest that this is like a expected sort of pathway that we're going. I think what makes this minute different to me is that in those other examples that I just said, we were outsourcing a task, like memorizing something, navigating, but this is a little bit more like outsourcing reasoning, which seems like a much bigger cognitive process. And I think that means that we need to pay a little bit more attention to the moment. Yeah.
As if we weren't already moving into idiocracy, this is going to make it worse. I'm starting to picture like the end of WALL-E with the people, in their little floating chairs just watching TV all the time.
Yeah, I think that's it. But I also think that there's quite a bit of hope out there. So there was a great study that just came out by one of the researchers was David Deming, who is former HGSE faculty. I promise that's not why I'm saying it's good. And is the current dean of Harvard College. And this study particularly showed that productivity gains were there for workers who used AI, but only if they had really good calibration skills about their capability. And calibration meaning a sense of like how much you know and how competent you are versus the actual task. And calibration is a key part of metacognition. And then also a recent study that was done on creativity and metacognition has shown us that if you are metacognitive, you engage in metacognitive reasoning throughout your use of AI while trying to engage in ideation and other types of creative thinking, you were more creative. But if you didn't, you weren't. So I think there is really good signal that that metacognition is probably something we can start thinking about intentionally and start designing for. I would say the challenge, and why I'm so glad we're having this chat today, is that we're in this sort of bind, I think, because metacognition is usually prompted in our environment, like for us to be metacognitive. So when we engage in struggle, that often will prompt us to be like, oh, this feels a bit hard. Why is it feeling hard? What could I do to make it easier? Or if something is unfinished, we might be prompted to engage in metacognition because we look at it and we evaluate the unfinished product and we say, oh, this isn't quite done yet. What do I think is missing? What do I need to do? How do I move forward? Where have I approached this before? But with AI, Gen AI is sort of like removing the triggers or the prompts for metacognition. So it's giving us a final finished product with confidence, like, that was such a great question. Here is the beautiful final product, And on top of that, it's also doing it very quickly. And metacognition takes time. So I think we're in this sort of weird situation where we really need metacognition so we don't accidentally lose all of our, cognitive functioning. And the tool that we're using eliminates a lot of the prompts for it. So how do we think about changing how we design tools or changing the context in which the tools exist to help us keep that?
So what's the antidote then? Or what's the antidote to that whole thing then? What do you think? If it's like one thing, what would it be?
I mean, one thing?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Well, I mean, we can go from there. But if you had one thing, how do you combat that?
Yeah, I mean, I think... So to me, metacognition has 4 enabling conditions. Am I allowed to get away with 4 instead of 1?
Yeah,
okay.
You can.
So it needs explicit prompting from the environment, which we talked about, dedicated time and cognitive space. It also needs occasion recognition, so you notice the situation calls for monitoring. And it needs emotional signals like confusion or uncertainty that flag that something needs attention. So I think the key right now is how do we create, like I said, learning environments or or tools, AI-based tools that infuse or support or don't accidentally eliminate these conditions, so that we can be prompted to be metacognitive over our thinking and reasoning that we're doing in a distributed fashion with artificial intelligence.
So it's like we need to be more intentional about kind of creating those triggers for the metacognitive moments for ourselves, because it's not happening naturally.
Yeah.
So either that's a discipline that we could kind of learn for ourselves, or we can build it into the AI tools and the AI interactions to help us do that for us.
Or as educators or managers, we can craft those things to be present in our environment. And so some really tactile ways that I'm seeing this work in my own research is creating tools that do things like elicit before generating. So they are non-convergent. They don't immediately go straight to like giving the answer. Instead, they prompt human thinking, they prompt question asking, they try to elicit information from the user before they generate. So if the tool isn't designed to do that, I as a human could say, all right, before I use this, let me sit down and write down everything that I think I know about this, right? Or an educator or a manager could say, let's come together and have a conversation about everything that we think we know about this and surface that, and now let's go to do it. So that's one. Another would be to show the reasoning. So I think AI tools, they don't always make the process visible, and sometimes like the things that they say they're doing are more about users feeling good than actually what they're doing. Like they're not necessarily true. Yeah. And so being able to actually like open and see all of the reasoning, I think would be a really helpful way of being able to say, oh, do I agree with this or not, or etc.
Yeah. Because Claude thinks I'm the most intelligent person in the entire world.
Well, he's not wrong.
Well, thank you, Tessa. My wife might have a different point of view. But yeah, it's like an ego stroke every time that you use it, right? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like, oh, that's such a great idea, Bob. You should do that. You were right to push back on me on that. I really messed that, yeah.
I think that this is, though, actually, one of the next points is about making sure that we preserve the messy middle. So my personal biggest concern is that metacognition is the most powerful, and I know that you see this in your context of work too, when it happens in the doing, not in the, like, reflection. Like, if you are just thinking about your thinking in your like after action report, like what good does that do? Because like the thing's done, right? You need to do it.
Which is why they created retros, correct? Like that's a ritual. Right. So after the project's done, or after a week, let's do a retro. It's very passive and after the fact. Yeah.
So you'll do a little bit better next time, but this time's not going to get any better. So you're saying, can you actually do it more in the flow of it, so that whatever you're working on at that moment, you're getting the advantages of?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in a study that I did a couple of years ago, I saw a really crisp example of this from some innovation consultants who were really good at doing it in the middle, and an really tactile example. But this one consultant was working in the clean tech energy industry. And she described how she was in these interviews with leaders in that industry, and they were using all of these acronyms. And she was so focused on clarifying all of the acronyms that after a day and a half of user research, she actually had like no insights, but she had a whole dictionary of acronyms. And she was like, well, this isn't helpful. Like if I keep going like this, I'm not going to have anything at the end. And so she sat down and thought about how she could change her strategy, and she came up with the idea that she was going to write every acronym down she heard and circle it and move on and focus on the person, and then follow up with emails and then create the sort of the dictionary at the end. And so that's a really great example of being metacognitive about a really small thing. But ultimately, if she hadn't have done that, she could have gone for weeks without getting any real insights, any real thing to then, come up with creative ideas and build upon.
So one of the things, you kind of mentioned it before, but you've used this term. And for those in the audience, Tessa and I have worked together for a while. but you have used the term productive friction in the past, which is something I personally love. Not only as an individual, but someone who leads teams and individuals, I think of how am I creating the right conditions to enable and ensure productive friction actually occurs. Can explain that and start to relate it to what you just even mentioned, but why
also,
do you think...
I do know that phrase, and I haven't been working with you guys. You guys have been leaving me out.
Sorry. You're on our text chat. What are you talking about? You see it all the time. Anyway, but why do you think it's so important?
So I think, to me, productive friction is anything that essentially requires us to use our metabolic energy, and therefore is something we're pushing against and we don't want to do, and that creates kind of friction. So it's like effort,
which is great for learning.
Yeah,
absolutely great for learning.
Essential for learning, but it's productive in that it results in learning. It's not just friction that sucks and doesn't give us anything. So productive friction. And what we know about productive friction is that if we don't have effort, if we don't have sort of that kind of productive friction involved in a learning experience, actually learning doesn't happen. So learning is two neurons having a new neural pathway created between them. If you think about that, you literally have to forge a new connection, and that takes effort and friction and focus, right? And so it's not easy. And in a lot of tools today, we are optimizing for easy and engagement and fastness and fun, and shying away from productive friction. But with that comes a challenge. So another study that I recently did, we compared a human coaching agent with an AI coaching agent. And the AI coaching agent was a non-convergent agent, like I sort of described. And they were teaching leadership behaviors. And the first thing that we found is that there's actually no difference in the performance outcomes of the individuals in the study based on either agent type. But they hated the AI agent. Deeply, vitriol was spewed at the AI agent. They hated it.
And the agent was a coach, right?
A coach, yeah. It was a non-convergent coach. And the kinds of things that they hated about the AI agent, ironically, were the exact things that they loved about the human coach.
Interesting.
So they would say things like, it asked me questions and it didn't give me any answers and I just wanted it to tell me what to do. And then about the human experience, the same person having both, the human would then say things like, oh, they were such an amazing coach. They asked me such insightful questions and really pushed my thinking, and I really was reflecting. And so they were really into it. And so one of the things that I think is interesting about productive friction is that we seem to tolerate it better from humans. And it's important in AI agents to be effective. As we saw, there was no difference in the learning outcomes. But if they're not going to use it because they hate it, because they don't want to engage in productive friction from an agent, that's a problem.
Yeah. We've got a whole crowd in front of us. I'm interested. How many people here, I'm going to try to be nice about this because I think it's important. How many people here feel a bit of a repulsion towards AI?
Complete. Absolute.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Complete, absolute. Yes. Okay. Have you guys walked around Austin this week and seen any of the delivery robots rolling around? Did anybody else try to intentionally get in front of one to see what it would do? Yeah, a few of us, right?
You have some kindred spirits here.
I know, right?
Clunkers, we call
clankers.
them. Clankers, sorry, clankers.
Yeah, I love the fact that we are calling these robots clankers. By the way, that is a reference to Star Wars, The Clone Wars. And now I got my Star Wars reference in for today, which is really great.
That's a check.
So, but yes, I've seen other studies and it just really seems to be growing. And I would also observe that it seems to be growing more in America than it is in other places. I'd be interested if you see anything different of just a natural repulsion towards AI right now. We're kind of in an anti-AI.
Yeah, I think that two things are true at once. I think that's true, but I also think the use, everyday people use is up so high. Adoption.
People are still generating photos even though they hate it. I'm doing this.
The best thing is when on LinkedIn you see people write posts that are critical of AI, but really clearly written by AI.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Drives me nuts.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it's a both and.
Yeah, for
Love-hate relationship.
I think
Toxic
now,
relationship.
But also with Gen AI, if you think about what are we now 3 years into since ChatGPT was 3.5 was announced, it's almost that natural tech usage curve. After a while, people figure out what it's really good, or what they're really good for them, and then others have figured out what is good for them, and so it's just kind of that natural, I think, moment.
Yeah.
There's also a huge push right now, just in terms of technology within the classroom, especially. This push against, should we be using EdTech, should we not as much, just because of recent studies. So I just feel like right now we're in this in-between stage a bit of what we think is good and what was not.
Yeah, finding our way.
Yeah, I think, and EdTech is really something we should be learning from at the moment, I think. A few things. So one big thing I think we need to learn is that with the introduction of EdTech, everyone just sort of assumed that adoption and engagement would drive learning. And yes, engagement is really helpful in learning, but engagement without productive friction or desirable difficulty or effort isn't going to actually result in learning. It might result in completing the game, but that doesn't mean that learning happened. And I think if we fall into that again as we go through using AI tools in education, that will be sort of problematic. But the second thing is I think we didn't put enough guardrails around EdTech use, and we're seeing the consequences of that in young people today. And so I really hope that we think a little bit more about the risks associated, and not to say let's not use AI. That's not what I'm saying. But I think let's just think a little bit more intentionally about the risks and how to mitigate them and how to design thoughtfully and responsibly, so that we don't end up in this situation where we have headlines like we do about cell phones and kids today in another 10 years.
I have a bunch of VR headsets in a warehouse that would agree on making assumptions about educational value. One of the obstacles that I see, because the thesis that we're coming to here is we want to be teaching people to be more metacognitive, to be more aware of good metacognitive strategies. I was chatting with my sister on text yesterday, and she is a retired school teacher. She's going to be so happy that I referred to her on this episode of the podcast. This is what she said to me when I said we were talking about metacognition in an AI era. She said, metacognition was a buzzword in public schools 10 years ago, but it has faded. With the emphasis on test and empirical data, there's no way to measure it, so bye-bye. What do you think about that? You can say nasty things about my sister, too.
Right.
She never listens, right?
So with all respect for your sister and for her incredible service.
I clearly don't have much, but you go ahead.
And for her incredible service as an educator, because they're so important. There actually is incredible data on the efficacy of metacognition, especially in schools, as I think I alluded to earlier. But I think there are sort of two things here. One is that sometimes people think about metacognition a little inaccurately. So they think about metacognition as recounting. So actually, I'm going to pick on a family member too. So my mother-in-law English is her second language, and she would write the most hilarious travel journals. And they would be woke up in Rome, had orange juice, went for a walk, saw lots of old buildings, Vicky was tired. This is literally what these journals would look at. And I think sometimes we think that's what metacognition is, this recounting of something that happened.
Reflection, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more generously reflection.
Yeah.
Regurgitation.
But that is just saying, I would actually say that's still being cognitive. That's not being metacognitive. So, for example, if a metacognitive version, let's see how this goes, a metacognitive version of Nada's trip might be something along the lines of I woke up in Rome, I noticed that I was so excited to be here because the last time I was here, XYZ happened, and it's filled me with this sense of anticipation. I decided to go downstairs and have orange juice for breakfast. It tasted so good, and I think that was because of the energy and excitement that I'm feeling about being in this city. I noticed that the last few days my feet have got really sore. I wonder what I might do differently today with my shoes to help me feel a bit better as we're walking around, because from memory, Rome has lots of cobblestones and steps. So you can sort of see there the depth and texture of the thinking is different. She's interrogating her thinking also her emotions, which are an essential part of cognition, her actions, her shoe choices. So she's interrogating those and adjusting them.
Yeah.
And that is metacognition, not, whereas the, like, I woke up at 8 a.m. and ate orange juice is not metacognition.
Right. Very interesting.
So I'm looking at the time, although we always say looking at a clock on the wall, which we don't have a clock on the wall. But anyway, the clock on the wall says that we're almost up on our time. So I would love to just, maybe we should share a couple of big moves that not only any individual can do, but also those that are teachers who have students, those that are not in the education space who are maybe manage teams, or a people leader of any kind. Like, what would you think would be a move or two?
Yeah. The very first move is give yourself time. Talking about time. You cannot be cognitive and metacognitive at the same time. It's not possible. Humans cannot multitask. Parallel processing is not real. So you cannot do both of those things at once. So you have to give yourself space to be metacognitive. That can be like 2 minutes. It doesn't have to be forever. But intentional space to be metacognitive. And so when you're using a tool, a Gen AI tool, or you have your students interacting with something, I would be intentionally building into that workflow, where are the moments where I'm going to think about my own and my distributed thinking and reasoning that's happening, and the choices that I'm making, and why I'm using a tool, and the questions about the output. So give yourself time, bake it in. And then the second big thing that I would say is make sure that you give yourself time in the middle of things. Stop in the middle of stuff and interrogate what's happening, and think about what you predict is about to happen, and where you are, and why you think that will happen, and where you faced things like this before, and what you could use to maybe change the trajectory you're on if that's not where you want to be on. Like, stop in the middle. Don't wait to the end.
So I'll share a couple, and I'm looking at one of my colleagues over here, Susie Robertson, who uses this phrase, have the courage to seek friction. Don't be afraid of it. So if I'm going to make a choice to use, let's say, Gen AI for something, maybe help me write or help me do a task, I'm going to make this choice. By making this choice, is it going to be easy? Is it going to allow me to push myself, or am I going to use it in a way that I could still own my thinking, mostly own my thinking, or is it going to take it or offload it completely? So that's one thing that I do. And then as someone who's like leads a team, leads people, it's what are the conditions to make sure that I ensure that friction can happen. That I'm not giving them easy tasks. I am thinking about their personal development. I'm thinking about, actually, I'll give a real quick example. I know we're almost up on time, but we do a huge meta-analysis. We look at a lot of trend reports. We really synthesize all of them. And today, I can take all of those global reports that are 45, 50 of them. We can put it into some type of GPT, analyze it, but we actually remove that. We remove that deliberately. The purpose is we want everyone to truly read, synthesize, and develop a perspective on their own. So it's actually more, in essence, like a learning exercise for them to get outside their bubble. So that's one way that, like, I made that choice. Again, I know I can speed that up, but that's one thing that I thought of a lot of, like, this is actually a better thing for them. So those are two real-world examples. I don't know, Bob, if you just have a real quick, or Tessa follow.
And just to quickly add to that, I think if you had made the choice in that instance to use Gen AI to do that synthesis, because what you needed was really fast understanding of the top 5 trends in L&D, like, go for it. Like, but understand what your goal is, and then
what you're giving it up.
Make
yeah,
the
exactly.
choice.
There is a goal. Yeah.
My last thought is, and we could go for another 2 hours on this, so I'll be as quick as I can, is if you think about the hero's journey archetype of stories, the myths that have gone across every culture kind of since time began, the way I abridge that is a good story is about a hero who needs something and has to overcome conflict to get it. Conflict equals friction. It's built into the human psyche that in order to really get something of value, there's got to be some friction and some challenge to do it, and I think it's kind of pre-telling that. Tessa Forshaw, thank you so much for being our guest.
Yeah, thank you,
It was fantastic.
Tessa.
To our audience, thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
This is great. Awesome. Everybody listening to the recording, we're glad you're here. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. Jake, we'll see you next time we record. In the meantime, tune in to the next episode of the Learning Geeks podcast. We'll see you real soon.
Thanks, everybody.